The last story we had was about baby Moses. Remember Moses? He was a little baby, and his mom, to save his life, put him in a basket, and they put him in the Nile River around some grass and waited and waited. And then the princess came, and she found the baby in the basket, and she decided that she was going to take him as her son. And she did. So Moses was very blessed in that not only was he not killed, but he also got to live in the palace as a prince. And he probably had all kinds of the best education and clothes and all these things. But Moses, as he grew older, he knew that he was a Hebrew. And he didn't like the things that were happening to his people, the way they were treated and what they had to do. Remember, we talked about how they were slaves and they had to work very hard. One day he was out in the city and he saw a slave, a Hebrew slave, who was being beaten by an Egyptian because he wasn't doing something right. And Moses got very angry. And when he tried to stop the Egyptian, he actually killed him. And then he was very afraid, because he was afraid that if the king found out, the Pharaoh found out what he had done, that he would be killed too. And so Moses ran away. And he ran to an area and became part of another family. He got married, and he helped his father-in-law with his sheep. He became a shepherd. And in the area where they lived, there was a mountain. And on the mountain, there was a bush. And sometimes that bush would catch on fire, but it wouldn't burn. And Moses had kind of seen it from a distance, but one day when he was out, he found it. And he saw it, and he went up to it. And God spoke to him from that burning bush. Now, God told Moses that he had this very special plan for him. He had chosen Moses to be the one who would get his people, the Hebrews, out of Egypt and take them to the promised land, the land that God had promised to give them to live in. And so Moses, they talked about it. He wasn't real keen on the idea, but he decided he would do what God told him to do. And so Moses went back to Egypt. There, he and his brother went to see the Pharaoh. It wasn't the same, it may have been somebody he knew, but it wasn't the same Pharaoh that had been there when he was a boy, but maybe his son had become king now. But anyway, so Pharaoh didn't want to let the Hebrews go. He didn't want to lose all those slaves. And so God showed his power by giving certain plagues or things that happened to the Egyptians to show them how powerful God was. And some of those things were, he turned the water in the river into blood, and so nobody could drink it. And the people didn't like that, and they complained. And when that happened, the Pharaoh said, "Okay, Moses, you can go." But after the blood went away, he changed his mind and said, "No, you can't." And then one, which I think is probably one of the funniest ones, is he brought frogs. There were frogs everywhere. You couldn't open a cabinet door or look inside a drawer or a box without seeing frogs. And the people were so upset. And once again, Pharaoh said, "Okay, Moses, take away the frogs and you can go." And the frogs went away. But then he said, "No, you really can't go." And the Bible said there were 9 things that he brought. He brought gnats, which are like little bitty flies that really bug you a lot, and flies, and some of the livestock died. People had boils, which were big sores on their legs and arms that are very painful, and that happened. And then there was hail, which is big pieces of ice that fall from the sky and damage the crops. And if that wasn't enough to damage the crops, then the locusts came. And locusts, well, they're like grasshoppers, only it was like a big cloud of them that came, and they eat everything in sight. And so it continued. And every time that something would happen, the Pharaoh would say, "Oh, just take it away and you can leave and you can go." But then when the plague would leave, he would say, "No, no, you can't leave." Finally, there was a plague of darkness where the sky darkened, and it was dark for a long time. And that was really scary. And people were sort of, maybe you ought to just let these people go. But still the Pharaoh wouldn't let them go. And finally, God had one last plague. And if the oldest child of every family would die, except for the Hebrews. And the Hebrews had special instructions. They were to go into their homes. They were to prepare to take a journey. and God would protect them. And sure enough, God did. And the night came, and there were people all over the city who died, but none of the Hebrews died. And the next morning, the Pharaoh, who was very angry at that point, said, "Go, just leave, just go away and don't ever come back." And so Moses and the rest of the Hebrew people, they headed out, and they headed north towards Canaan. Well, when they got to a river, they didn't know what they were going to do, and they couldn't cross the river because it was too deep. And they thought, what are we going to do? And then they turned around and they heard a noise, and it was the soldiers, and they were coming in their chariots after them. And they thought, oh no, what are we going to do now? Well, God caused a big cloud of fire or a pillar of fire to separate the Hebrews and those soldiers so they couldn't get through. And then he told Moses to go and to take his stick and to touch the water. And when he did, guess what happened? The water opened up, and it caused a pathway between the two walls of water that he could walk on that was dry. And so all of the Hebrew people were able to cross the river on dry ground. And when they all reached the other side, and Moses reached the other side, then God moved that pillar of fire, and the chariots came. And the chariots came, and while they were trying to cross that river, God caused the water to go back down, and all of those soldiers were killed, and God's people were safe. Now, they have many exciting journeys in the weeks and months and years to come. It takes them 40 years to get to the Promised Land, and we'll tell that story another day. I hope you have a good day. Bye.